All right, welcome everybody to today's live stream. My name is Cyrus Jansen, and it is so good to be back with you guys here on YouTube. It's been a while since we've done a live stream, and I'm excited to join you today because we have a very important topic to discuss. And this is something actually remarkable. And this is, of course, China's very big pivot away from zero COVID. This is something that many people did not predict would ever happen. And I think it's so important that we discuss this because it's something that many people, again, never thought China would do. There's been a lot of China haters that have been coming out over the past really years and has been saying that China is using zero COVID to exert its control. China will never pivot away from this. And again, this is something just very fascinating to watch because China has done a complete 180. It is really laying down the foundation for reopening the country. There is a lot of optimism, I think, for the future in 2023, as we know that China will eventually get through this, much like many other countries in the West and around the world have gone through. And basically, what I want to do is I want to be breaking things down for everybody so that we can better analyze what's really happening in China. As we know, when it comes to China, there is a lot of sensational reporting. There's a lot of bias in Western media, as we know. And what I've been doing over the past week is I've been talking to many people on the ground in China. As you know, I've lived in China for over 10 years. I have a very large network of people. Essentially, every single person that I know in China has now contracted COVID-19. It has been amazing how fast this has really rippled through the entire Chinese society. We're talking basically every province, every city. I mean, it is widespread and it is moving very, very rapidly and very, very fast. And there's a few points that I really want to address in today's live stream. So let's go ahead and kind of bring up the live stream points that we're going to talk about. And there's really three main points that I want to discuss in tonight's live stream. The first is going to be, let's go ahead and analyze China's zero COVID policy. And we're going to analyze this and simply ask the question, was this a failure? Was it a success? What were the good? What were the bads that happened with China's zero COVID policy? I do think that there were some good things from it. I do think that there were some mistakes that were made as well. As you know, I try to be as unbiased and just very logical when we're dealing with China. I like to deal with facts. I want to see what's been going good. And there definitely were mistakes as well. We're going to specifically talk about that. But that's the first question. Was zero COVID a complete failure? Let's answer that question. Our second point is this is a very big thing that's being reported here in the West. And it's the fact that many people are feeling that China is actually underreporting the amount of deaths that are happening in China right now with this surge in COVID. I have some interesting data that I'd like to share about this because I want people to better understand, how China is actually recording the deaths of COVID. And as we know, up to this point, there's been around 5,000 or so deaths. That's the official count in China. So we're going to answer this question. I have some articles from both Western media, also from Chinese media that we can analyze, and we can better understand exactly how China is reporting these deaths. And then finally, we're going to talk about, is this exit a win or a loss for China? Again, this is a very big change that we've seen in China, something that many people did not see coming. And we're basically going to kind of predict the future. How is China going to get through this? What is the next few months going to look like in China? And essentially, is this going to be a win or a loss for China? I'm going to give you my personal predictions on this and what I kind of forecast really for 2023 moving forward. So, first of all, let's go ahead and start, and let's start the stream by saying I hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas. I've taken a little bit of break here on YouTube. I've been spending some time with my family here. It's been very recharged. I'm feeling very, very excited for the new year. There's a lot of exciting things that are happening. And I'm just really grateful to be here back on YouTube. I love doing these live streams, and I want everybody. Let's have a good session tonight, and let's really have a lot of fun. I think that's the main thing. Let's make this interactive. If you have questions, please drop them down into the comment section here. We're going to be answering this, and I'm really excited to be here with everybody here. So let's go ahead and look. I know we got a lot of people coming in. We're close to 300 people joining in the stream. Hi from Hong Kong, Malaysia. Nambia. This is great. Merry Christmas, Green Traveler. Going back to Shenzhen tomorrow. I think there's going to be a lot more people traveling. I think Hong Kong is going to be opening up that border between mainland China. It's going to be great. I think it's going to be great. There's a lot of optimism there. I see there's a comment in here saying, listen to Kyle Bass. I would say you want to do the exact opposite of Kyle Bass. That would be my recommendation. He is has been putting out a tremendous amount of false information and basically just completely misleading. And that's exactly what we're going to be discussing in today's stream. Benjamin, thanks for joining from Singapore, Taiwan. Aloha from Maui. Simon, Merry Happy Christmas and a New Year, Cyrus. Thank you so much. All right, guys, let's go ahead and jump into the stream. All right, let's go ahead and start our topic for today. So this is reporting from the Financial Times, and we see that China now estimates that 250 million people have caught COVID in the past 20 days. I would say that number is probably even more, because we know this article is a few days old. We know that China has basically dropped all of the COVID restrictions. So, for example, what we know before, China had a very, very strict policy with zero COVID. Essentially, anywhere that you wanted to go in China, you needed to have a green QR code. It was an amazing system that China implemented, but it had a lot of difficulties with it, because it really put a lot of anxiety and pressure on the society. Because, for example, if you are in Shanghai and you needed to go to Beijing for a business trip, there was a lot of worry there, because, for example, will your QR code turn yellow? Will it turn red? Have you been exposed to anybody? If you are, then you're not able to travel back to Shanghai. You might be stuck in Beijing. Maybe you can't go to Beijing. Maybe you leave Shanghai with a green QR code, but as soon as you get to the hotel in Beijing, now it's yellow. Now you can't check in. You essentially can't go anywhere in Beijing. So it really started to restrict a lot of the traveling. It made business dealing very difficult, and this is something that we saw in China. Now, the interesting thing is that almost overnight, China's government pivoted away from this, and I think this is actually a really interesting case study, because one of the things that I want people to really understand is that I think that this is actually a very good thing for China. And I'm going to bring up a tweet here, because this shows you, we're going to kind of start the stream off by showing you a tweet from Gordon Chang. And this is really important to understand, because this is what many anti-China people have been saying for a very long time. I'm talking months, even years. And this is Gordon Chang back in June of this year. He sent out this tweet: China's regime is intent on destroying China. The zero COVID approach will be continued for another 5 years. Hashtag COVID-19. Now, if you listen to a lot of anti-China YouTube channels or people that are very biased against China, this is the line that they are consistently peddling. They are saying that China's zero COVID policy actually had nothing to do with health. It was all about Xi Jinping exerting his control on the population. This is something that you often hear from these YouTubers and from other people like a Gordon Chang. And the funny thing is that what he's essentially wanting is he's wanting China to pivot away from zero COVID. He's saying that, zero COVID is draconian. It is too much. It is crippling Chinese society. He very much wants China to move away from zero COVID. Now, the interesting thing is that as soon as China does that, of course, Gordon Chang now opens up and he completely pulls a 180. He completely contradicts himself here. And now it's, well, pray for the Chinese people. Now they're defenseless before a disease. Hashtag China, hashtag COVID-19. And so this is the very interesting situation that China often finds itself in. It's very much a damn if you do, damn if you don't, right? If China continues its zero COVID policy, many people in the West will be absolutely hammering China. You are restricting freedom. This is too draconian. China's government is exerting too much control. Now, all of a sudden, China does basically what many people in the West have been asking China to do. They've pivoted away. They have begun to open up the society. They've gotten rid of the QR codes. They are saying we're moving away from zero COVID. We're changing our policy. And now, exactly, you can see with Gordon Chang, it's always going to be a negative for China. No matter what China does, they cannot win. So now it's like, well, this is completely irresponsible. China's government is now leaving, hundreds of million people, susceptible to this disease. So again, it's, what can China really do? Again, it's a damn if you do, damn if you don't. China's always going to be in the losing position, in the eyes of many people in the West. Now, the interesting thing is that I was actually chatting with another YouTuber on Twitter. This is a YouTuber that has a very significant following. He's produces a lot of anti-China content. And, he tweeted at me and said, Cyrus, there is something much bigger at play here. It has nothing to do with health. This is all about control. Don't you think that China's government could, implement mandatory vaccines? They could if they wanted, but they're choosing not to. There's something bigger at play here. And again, what I predicted, what I replied back to this YouTuber, I said, well, what you're going to see is you're going to have to see that China's government is going to have to pivot away from zero COVID. It just has to, right? We know that there has come some significant costs with China's zero COVID policy. There's been a benefit and analysis. If we go back to that first point here, was zero COVID a complete failure? What I want people to understand is that what China has been able to do over the last 3 years with zero COVID, there has been some positives and there has been some negative. Let's first examine why China actually instituted the zero COVID policy. And I want people to basically understand this because, as many of you know, I'm now back in the United States, and I spend a lot of my time talking with Americans, talking with people, trying to educate them more about China so that they understand. This is something very simple that I help people understand. In Western society, if you have a city with a population over 1 million people, this is considered a very, very large city in Western standards. For example, in the United States of America, currently, right now, there are 14 cities that have a population of over 1 million people. 14. Now, if we look at China, okay, China is more than 10 times that amount. China has over 155 cities with a population of at least 1 million people. So one of the first things that I try to really help people understand is I say, look, I lived in Shanghai. Shanghai is a city with well over 20 million people. We cannot grasp that in Western society. We cannot really comprehend what a city like that is. I mean, again, New York City, most populated city in America, is less than half that population. There's around 8 million people in New York City. So even our biggest, our best, our most densely populated in city is not even 50% of what a city like Shanghai is. Now bring in Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Chongqing, Chengdu. I mean, these are all mega metropolis cities that have tens of millions of people living in very densely populated, parts of society. Now, zero COVID did make sense in the beginning because there were two things. Number one, we had a virus that we knew very little about, and we had zero vaccines. So when you look at, for example, again, the city that I love the most in China is obviously Shanghai because I lived there for 7 years. It's the city that I know the best. Shanghai is the most modern. It's a metropolis. It's the most advanced, whatever adjective you want to use. It is an amazing city. For me, I would put Shanghai in a very small group of world-class cities in the world. You think of New York City, London, Paris, Shanghai. I mean, I would put Shanghai right in the very top of the top as far as world-class cities. Even a city as advanced and modern as Shanghai, it does not have the hospital capacity to handle a full-on outbreak. So if Shanghai could not do it, certainly Beijing or other cities would absolutely, it would overwhelm the hospitals. It would cause a significant amount of death. So I think when we're analyzing China's zero COVID policy, it's very important that people understand that there was a lot of success in the beginning, and that was due to China's zero COVID. In addition, if we have to look back, I mean, the other thing that we tend to forget is that we've been dealing with this for over 3 years now. So what was also very interesting is that in the initial phase, when zero COVID, I'm talking in 2020, when COVID-19 was traveling around the world, when China instituted its zero COVID policy, it was very successful. And there was a point there in China for about 12 to 15 months where essentially COVID was non-existent. right? You saw this from many other China YouTubers where they were traveling domestically in China. Basically, all of my friends and contacts in China, the only thing that they couldn't do was essentially leave the country. They said, we basically inside of China, we're in a very safe environment, and domestic tourism is absolutely flourishing. People are, traveling around China. People, at that time, this is again in 2020, COVID was absolutely spiraling out of control, seemingly in every country around the world except China. And that really was an amazing period of time to be in China. It was very much a very safe time. But as we know with these viral diseases, they begin to mutate and they begin to change. And really the game changer for China and the zero COVID policy was the Delta and the Omicron variants. As we know with the current strain of COVID-19, and this is exactly what we've seen. Let's bring up that article once more when it says China estimates 250 million people have caught COVID in 20 days. The current strain of COVID-19 is extremely contagious. It is as contagious as the common cold. So, as a result of that, zero COVID has now become almost impossible to really implement. And this is something that I think it's okay to say that because what we can go on is we can go on data. And the thing is that if your opinion of COVID is the same as March 2020 right now, then it's not correct because the data continues to change. And the more that we learn about this disease, our opinions need to be shifting and we need to be changing our perspective. In March 2020, I was scared as just about everybody else in the world about COVID-19. I didn't want to contract the disease. I was scared. I was very concerned for China as it started to, come here in North America. I remember very clearly, for example, dropping my daughter off at a daycare. And I said, hey, you know what? Like, we really need to prepare because we live in a very connected world. I mean, as the world is traveling around the world, we know that this disease is going to spread. So like, I think there's going to be a wave happening in, North America. This was, and we actually saw that. If you look back at my very early videos from almost 2-3 years ago, we saw that in the Chinese community in Vancouver, Canada, where I was living. The Chinese community in February 2020, they were walking around in Vancouver, Canada with face masks on. And they knew like, hey, this is going to travel. We've had experience with these diseases before. Obviously, the big SARS outbreak in Hong Kong, roughly 15 plus years ago. They knew that this was going to happen. And I think this is a really interesting thing that we have to observe with China is that is basically this course. It's really interesting to see how this disease has developed. Now, as the zero COVID went on, and this is where I think China did make some mistakes. And again, I'll talk about the good and the bad. One of the things that I think was very, very difficult was when we saw earlier this year was the very strict lockdown that we saw in Shanghai. Now, this was in my opinion too much. And again, I made a vlog about this. I made a vlog commenting that when they did the Shanghai lockdown in 2022, it really crossed the line because by 2022, the variant was significantly less dangerous. And essentially, I think this is the main criticism that you can give China is that you could say they have waited a little bit too long to loosen the restrictions of zero COVID. I think that's the correct criticism that you can give China. And a good case study would be, what we saw in Shanghai earlier this year. I was very transparent about that. I brought on an American, a Taiwanese American that's living in Shanghai. He goes by the name of Frank Tsai. Frank, if you follow him on LinkedIn, he's done a tremendous amount of media interviews with CNN, BBC, and he's been reporting, on the ground in Shanghai. I think it was over 100 days, right? It was a very long lockdown in Shanghai, extremely strict, and it went too far. And it really was a bit too much, for where the disease was. And so I think that's the correct criticism that you can give China. And essentially, this is what you've seen, this really big pivot from China now, simply saying, let's look at the data. We know that Omicron at this point and the variants right now, they are significantly less dangerous than before. And this is why, again, China has had to do this pivot now. Again, I'm going to go back and I want to say that I think this is, first of all, a very big win, because for the China haters out there, the people that have been consistently saying China is only using zero COVID to control the population, and it's basically Xi Jinping implementing its control, well, that theory has now been thrown out the window. That theory has been disproved. Again, when I was tweeting against the other China YouTuber that produces a lot of negative China content, he said, Cyrus, there's something bigger at play here. And my response to him was this. I said, no, what you're going to see is you're going to see China pivoting away, and you're also going to see China implementing more vaccines for the elderly. And that's exactly what China's done now. Okay, China has pivoted away from zero COVID. It has now dropped all of these very strict requirements, and it has also been boosting its vaccination rate against the elderly, who, again, at this point, really are the only group of people that are really susceptible to this disease. This is my opinion about COVID-19. One of the again, I like to look at data. If we look at Hong Kong, for example, when Hong Kong opened up a few months ago, Hong Kong had around 60,000 deaths that they experienced when they began to open up. This is a lot. This is a large number. Obviously, 60,000 people losing their life is a serious concern. But what you saw from that data is that 95% of the people that passed away, 95% of that 60,000, they were above the age of 65, and every single one of them had underlying health conditions. And that's really the point where we are with COVID-19 right now, is that it is very much an advanced flu. And it really is a point where if you are above the age of 65 and you have underlying health conditions, you are the prime target for COVID-19. And that is where you really do need to be, prioritizing your vaccination rates. I think for people like myself, I'm in my 30s, I'm in good health, I eat healthy, I take care of my body. It's an investment. I try to, eat healthy and, stay strong. When you are in good health and you don't have underlying health conditions, I honestly don't think that COVID-19 poses much of a threat. And this is what we're seeing in China right now. Again, what I mentioned earlier is that I know pretty much every single person that I that I've seen, that I know in China. All of them have been exposed at this point. The vast majority of people that I've talked to, the vast majority have said, Cyrus, it's nothing more than a serious cough, a cold. I've been down for a couple of days. I'm back. I've recovered, all of that. And so this is where I want people to, we really need to be more rational. And so I'm actually, I don't know if proud is the right adjective to use, but I'm very happy for China. I'm very happy that they've pivoted away. But again, I'm going to just say this again, because I think it is so important to really hit on this point in today's live stream. Let me just say this point one more time. We're going to take a break. We're going to answer some super chats. We're going to answer some questions. And the key thing here is that with China pivoting away from zero COVID, it basically disproves a lot of what the anti-China haters have been saying all along, that China's government is only implementing this for control. All of that has been thrown out the window, and that is a very big win for China, in my opinion. All right. So let's go ahead and say we've got over 600 people in the stream here today. Thank you, guys. I hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas and holiday. I'm going to answer some of the super chats we were seeing. Dips, thank you for the super chat here. Thanks for being you. I appreciate that very much. And Dips, you're also a member of our channel here. We've got some big, I have some big things in store for our channel members, everybody that wants to join the channel or our Patreon community. In the new year, I'm going to be releasing a lot of, exclusive videos exclusively for my Patreon and my channel members. So I really want to say, thank you to everybody that supports that. And also, Bay Ray, a long-term Patreon supporter, finally catch your live stream. Yeah, today what I've done, guys, is I've done my last few live streams I've done in the evening times here. As you know, I'm on the West Coast in America. The evening times for me is a good time. I usually do it after my kids go to bed. The problem is that it's very late on the East Coast, and it's essentially at like 3 in the morning in Europe. So it essentially blocks out a lot of people from being able to see this stream. Over the last few weeks, I've had a lot of people email me, hey, Cyrus, I'm in Europe. I really want to catch your live stream. Can you please do it at a time that is actually better for all of us? And I kind of like this time zone. It's really good. It's early for me. It's just almost 7 a.m. here on the West Coast, but it's a nice time because it essentially allows everybody in the world a chance to really watch this live stream, no matter where you are. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate the birthday greetings as well, Bayray. Thank you so much for the birthday greetings. This is actually a funny thing. I'm going to give you a side story here because when I lived in China, December 26th is actually the birthday of a very important person in China. Actually, Chairman Mao Zedong, his birthday is December 26th. Same as me as well. So Chairman Mao and myself, we both share the same birthday, December 26th. This is a really funny thing because when I was living in China and people would ask me, Cyrus, when is your birthday? And I tell them December 26th, about 50% of the people immediately made that connection. They'd be like, 哇塞，跟毛泽东一样的，哇，你很厉害的, and so it'd be like, wow, that's awesome. Your birthday's the same as, Chairman Mao. So, 50% of the people didn't know. So it was also a way that I would always make a joke with people. I'd be like, hey, my birthday's December 26th. Do you also know who has it? And they're like, Chairman Mao as well. Many people didn't know that. But the people that did know it, it was a fun thing that, got us talking. But a lot of Chinese people would say, wow, 这个就是缘分，你来中国的原因就是那个缘分，就是因为你跟毛泽东的生日一模一样的。So they would always say like your fate, your destiny, the reason why you came to China is because you had the same birthday as Chairman Mao. I thought that was always fun to say. So it is my birthday today, so I love being with all you guys. I am a Capricorn, and I am also got the Boxing Day birthday. So thank you guys. So guys, alles Gute zum Geburtstag. Thank you so much, PB World. Happy birthday from Toronto. Kevin, thanks for joining in from Toronto. Great city. Absolutely love. Yeah, I like this. This is a really good comment from Liang Zhuge. Cyrus talks politics, yet YouTube doesn't demonetize his channel. He does it in a way that YouTube has no excuse. I think this is something that I really want people to, at the end of this stream, I have a really important message that I want people to understand because I received a really great comment. I think all of you will be really interested to understand. So I'm going to share that. So make sure you stay attuned to the live. This is a really good point that I want to bring up. Thank you. A lot of seniors did die recently in Beijing. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, there's certainly going to be people dying from this. I mean, there's no way that we're going to cover that up. There's definitely, it's inevitable, right? I mean, anytime you're going to make a pivot like this, there's going to be a cost that's associated. But again, I think this is something that China needed to do. I'm very happy that they've made this move. I think in the long term, you're going to see China is going to win from this. I really do feel that. I really, really do. And again, I think China has, it has done something very good here for their long-term future. Here's PB World. I had COVID a few weeks ago. Terrible headaches and a cough. Might not be serious, but I do not want it again. Absolutely. The interesting thing is about a year ago, it was in December of 2021. My entire family, all 5 of us, we all contracted COVID. We were in Florida, which was at the time was a place where COVID was absolutely rampant. I mean, it was traveling here. And it's it's something that I think all of us have to go through. I mean, we've all seen that in Western society. I mean, a lot of people basically have had COVID. So let's go ahead and go on to the second. Let's see. This is a good question. Why are there many Malaysians? Did Uncle Roger bring you here? That's a funny one, Mansana. Actually, interesting, on my Google Analytics, on my YouTube Analytics, I can always analyze where the data is from, where my biggest viewers are. The majority of my viewers actually do come from the United States. Canada is number 2. But number 3 is actually Malaysia. I have about 12% of the followers on this channel come from Malaysia. So very big, so if you're from Malaysia, well, if you're from anywhere, I appreciate your support. But a huge shout out to the Malaysians that support the channel, because I know we got a lot of Chinese Malaysians that really love the content we produce here. And you know what? I want to go back to Malaysia. It's a fantastic place. It's a great country. Absolutely love it there. This is from Shen Fuqing. Omicron is mild. It's time to open. Absolutely. Singapore, James 10. Singapore is probably my favorite country in the world. Absolutely love it. I love what they're doing. Opti, here we go. I think you mentioned this to me in a comment. I'm from Canada, but celebrating Christmas with my family in Florence. Love from Canada. I think you mentioned earlier you're so excited for this time because you're able to join in. And here we go. James Smith, great question here. Hey, Cyrus, would you say the hospitals are currently packed in China? I definitely think that there is no doubt about it. There's definitely going to be very packed hospitals in China. There's a couple things that we need to analyze here, and it's going to leave me into the next segment, and that's going to be, has China been underreporting its deaths? That's the next topic that we're going to be talking about. But I think what we want to talk a little bit about first is Chinese society and how the hospital system works. Let me contrast this with America. In America, obviously, we have hospitals here. But what we also have is we have a lot of clinics as well. And this is something, for example, that you have a lot of walk-in clinics that can be just a very small office that, for essentially, let's imagine that you have a head cold or a flu or, a stomach bug, something very minor. So it's something that you don't necessarily need to go to the hospital. Obviously, if you've been in a car accident, you're severely injured, you'd go directly to the hospital. But let's just say that you're having, you don't feel well. You have a stomach flu, maybe you have a flu, you're just a little bit under the weather. In America, we have these walk-in clinics where people can just walk right in. You pay $75, $100 to see a physician, and you can get a prescription for, okay, you have a stomach problem. Here's some medicine. Take that. Off you go. Now in China, the difference is that typically when people are sick, they go directly to the hospital, and there is not a tremendous amount of these walk-in clinics that you see, here in the West. So there's no doubt is going to be a lot of hospitals that are going to be overwhelmed because if Chinese people are feeling, they're not feeling well, maybe they're contracted COVID, they're going to go directly to the hospital. So there's no doubt about it. There's going to be a lot of hospitals that are at maximum capacity, potentially overwhelmed. I think the other interesting thing is what's interesting is that we've seen a lot of reports that there's a shortage of Tylenol in China. And I know that this is probably true because in the country that I lived in for the past 5 years, Canada, there has been a nationwide shortage of Tylenol throughout all of Canada these past few months. So if Canada, a Western country, is having, difficulties accessing, medication like Tylenol, I would assume that yes, it could potentially see the same problems in China. Now, I want to be, I want to bring up another interesting point because let me bring up some data here, and this is a report that I saw from Euronews. China might be underreporting its COVID-related death toll. And this is something that I want to address because this is something that many people in the West are saying. China's government is covering up data. They're not reporting the COVID-19 deaths, and they're basically going to be underreporting so that they can keep that official death count low. That's the message that we're hearing very often here. Now, let me go ahead and read some of this article here. And I want people to understand exactly how China is reporting the deaths from COVID right now. Look at the middle part of this paragraph here. The National Health Commission said on Tuesday that only people whose death is caused by pneumonia and respiratory failure after contracting the virus are classified as COVID deaths. Okay, so this is essentially how China is now classifying its COVID deaths. Two conditions. Number one, you have to have died from pneumonia or respiratory failure after contracting the virus. Now, of course, people in the West are criticizing this. Here's, if you look at the last paragraph here, Benjamin Mazer, an assistant professor of pathology at Johns Hopkins University, said that classification would miss a lot of cases, especially as people who are vaccinated, including with the Chinese shots, are less likely to die of pneumonia. Now, the interesting thing here is this is the big controversy. Is China, are they basically underreporting or are they falsely reporting the deaths from COVID-19? If you watch CNN right now, what CNN is doing is they're going to these morgues in Beijing. They're saying, "Oh my gosh, look at all of these body bags, lined up. People are dying left, right, and center. There's, hundreds of people dying every day from COVID, but China's government is not, telling the truth about this." The one thing we need to remember as well is that this is wintertime. All right, there's going to be a lot of disease and the normal flu is still traveling around. There's going to be a lot of conditions with this. So it basically goes down to how do we classify COVID deaths? Now, the interesting thing is I want to show everybody a very interesting insight that I don't think many people know about America and how we have classified our COVID deaths. There's basically a difference because both governments, the United States government and China's government, could potentially be, I'm not going to say manipulating, but changing the requirements on a COVID death, to basically influence the outcome that they would like to receive. Let me give you an example. This is an article from USA Today. This was shared back in April 2020. So this is a couple years old, but here's what has been reported on in the United States. Hospitals get paid more if patients are listed as COVID-19 and on ventilators. Now, this is a really interesting article. Let's go ahead and read this because what I think you see in the United States is you see the opposite. Hospitals and people in the United States are actually reporting more COVID deaths because there is a financial incentive. Let's go ahead and read this article. This is a top health expert. His last name is Jensen, very close to mine, but he said, hospital administrators might well want to see COVID-19 attached to a discharge summary or a death certificate. Why is that? Because if it's a straightforward garden variety pneumonia that a person is admitted to the hospital, and if they're on Medicare, now Medicare is the government sponsored healthcare insurance that we have here in the United States. If you have pneumonia and you're on Medicare, okay, the government payment will give you $5,000. But if it's COVID-19 pneumonia, the government will give you $13,000. And if it's COVID-19 pneumonia and that patient ends up on a ventilator, it goes up to $39,000. Now, this is a really interesting insight. And again, this is something that we saw that was happening. And there's been a lot of reports about this. And this is what we saw because, and this is something that I've mentioned before on this YouTube channel. In the United States, we do not have a healthcare system. We have a healthcare industry. And one of the most valuable networks and kind of one of the most valuable ways that we make money in the United States is unfortunately healthcare. You contrast this with, for example, Canada. Canada, country that I lived in for the last 5 years. Both of my sons were born in Canada. I have twin boys that are 4 years old. They were both born in Vancouver Children's Hospital. Now, Vancouver and all of Canada has what we call a socialized medicine system. It is the government essentially provides this as a benefit for citizens in Canada. Healthcare in Canada is not seen as a for-profit enterprise. It is seen as something that is a basic human right in Canada. You see this in many countries around the world. UK, very common. Australia, many European countries have socialized medicine. Not the case in America. In America, it is for-profit. And this is, if you go on to read this, you can learn that this is this doctor. He said that he doesn't think that physicians are gaming the system, right? That physicians are. But when you look at hospital administrators, who he said may put pressure on physicians to cite all diagnoses, you might see that there is potentially some mistreatment here, okay? Because again, if you go back to that data, okay, and this is the United States again, if a patient comes into the hospital and he has regular pneumonia, okay, that's $5,000 from the US government based on Medicare. But if we diagnose him as COVID pneumonia and we put him on a ventilator, now the US government is giving you $39,000. There, of course, is going to be manipulation. There is, of course, going to be greed involved in this system. And this is what I want people to understand. So this is why I've also been a little bit skeptical of the United States saying, oh, wow, there's been over 1 million people dying from COVID. It's really hard to justify. It's really hard to clarify, did these people die from COVID? Because, for example, if somebody came in and said, okay, he's had a heart attack. This man has had a heart attack and he has died. The cause of death is a heart attack. Now, what people did in the United States is that they would run a test on him. Okay, they would analyze his body and they would say, oh, by the way, he actually had COVID at the time of his heart attack. Well, we're going to go ahead and classify that death as a COVID death. Now, this is the contrast between the United States and China. Same scenario in China. If a man came into the hospital in Beijing and he died of a heart attack, but it was also found that he had COVID-19, Beijing's government would say this man died of a heart attack. Whereas potentially you could see the opposite in America. America would say, well, he died of COVID. So did COVID-19 cause that man's heart attack? Potentially. But do we really know? Was there a blood clot that was caused by COVID-19 and that's what led to the heart attack? Or was he just simply an old man that had a heart attack? And by the way, he also had COVID-19. So you can see here, it's very difficult to really understand, how we're going to classify this. So when people right now, and this is again what you're seeing on CNN, what you're seeing in the West, again, they're going to come out hard. They're going to say, hey, China is falsifying data. China is trying to hide data. I think what you're seeing what you're seeing is a more strict policy from China on what there actually is going to be a COVID death. If you contract COVID-19, you're COVID positive, and then all of a sudden you have pneumonia and die, or you have respiratory failure, China's government is going to classify that as a COVID death. But because the difference is that we don't have this system that is financially motivated. And this is something where I often say, if you have money behind this, the human factor of greed becomes a very big probability. If you're a hospital administrator, there's no way that you would not be manipulated. Okay, it's greed. It's human nature. It's very easy for you to say, well, we could classify this guy as pneumonia and get $5,000, or I could classify it as COVID-19 pneumonia, put him on a ventilator, and now I get 8 times that amount. All right, literally 8 times that amount, $39,000. So again, this is a really important point that I don't think many people knew this about what was happening in America. But again, this is the criticism that I have about the United States with our healthcare system. There are some advantages, there are some big disadvantages, but it's very much a business. And that's what we do in America. We make everything a business. We try to make money off of everything. And this is my opinion on the COVID-19. So again, I don't think that China is manipulating data. I think it's just simply they're very strict on how they're reporting COVID-19 deaths. And again, they're going to be strict because they want to keep that number very low. Because I think what you're going to see in the long term is you're going to see China is going to win from its strategy. Again, going back to the beginning, was zero COVID needed? Yes, zero COVID was needed in the beginning because, again, the vast majority of people, at the time, there was no vaccine, and China is very densely populated. Zero COVID worked for a very long portion of time. The criticism that I have, and I think many people do have, is that you can make the argument that China implemented zero COVID too long. This reopening that has just happened in China, potentially that could have happened a lot earlier in the year. Because earlier this year, already the Omicron variant was significantly less dangerous. That's the criticism that I have. But again, there were some big successes. If you go back earlier this year, February of 2022, I was doing a lot of videos about Beijing Olympics. Obviously, that was a trending topic. That was the big event that was happening in the world. China did a fantastic job implementing its zero COVID policy and keeping all of those athletes safe. We had American snowboarders who came out in the media and said, one of the things that I want to do is I want to give credit to China's government for keeping us safe. And of course, American media blocked that, right? Any of these USA snowboarders, when they gave these positive reports about China and China's zero COVID policy, absolutely, they were absolutely blocked in Western media because nothing can be, we don't want to say anything positive about China in the West. That's the message that we want to do. What I had to do is I had to go on Chinese media, and I actually had to pull those clips off of Chinese media and then put them on my YouTube channel. Because again, we actively censor content in this country. Anything that would be positive about China, we're going to censor that content. If a team, God forbid, an American snowboarder would come out and say something positive about China's government and about the zero COVID. That's what happened. Of course, that got blocked here in the West, but that's why we have this channel, because we're trying to bring a little bit more balance to the equation. I've had a lot of people, message me on LinkedIn. I had a German national guy by the name of Mirko. He messaged me on LinkedIn, and he criticized me. He said, Cyrus, China is underreporting the deaths. You absolutely need to talk to this about on your YouTube channel. And I said, I will report this, but I will address this, I should say, and let me give you another perspective. And I shared with him the exact same thing about what I just told you about how America has been inflating its COVID numbers because of a financial incentive. And he was amazed. He's like, wow, I didn't know that. That's been unreported here in Germany. I had no idea. And I said, yeah, this is why it's important to kind of understand and analyze all, aspects of this, of zero COVID, because again, we need to understand what's happening in the West. We need to understand what's happening in China. But again, And let me just bring up the next segment here because this is really important because what I've seen from a lot of people, this is what I've been seeing in Western media with much of the population unvaccinated. China's soaring COVID numbers raise global fears with much of the population unvaccinated. Now, this is the interesting thing because this is where headlines really influence public opinion about China. We have to remember in social media and in the way people consume content right now, many people only look at a headline. They're not going to read this article. They're basically going to read the headline and then read the key message underneath. You're thinking with much of the population unvaccinated. Now, all of a sudden, you're thinking that's the majority. Okay. When you hear much of the population, that would institute a majority of people. I would imagine if I read that would be like, well, okay, well, it's got to be over, 50%. It's got to be a lot of people that are unvaccinated in China. So again, this is where Deutsche Welle, this is German media, of course, Deutsche Welle is, again, they are misleading with these headlines. If we just do some simple research, all right, this is Our World in Data, and this is the share of people vaccinated against COVID-19 as of December 1st, 2022. So this is very recent data. We look at China, 89% is having the definitions of that full vaccination, and you're looking at like 92% is having that having one of two dose protocol. You can see the source at the bottom there that implements that. But basically, China is number 2 in the world as far as vaccinating. I'm going to bring up another data. This is Zhang Yixin. He is the Deputy Director of National Health Commission, and this is really interesting. This is back in July of this year. The current vaccination rate in 31 provinces. This is including autonomous regions, municipalities, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, China, basically everywhere. We're at 94.4%. The booster vaccination rate was 81% for those aged 60 to 69. When you're looking at 70 to 79 is 82%. Hold on. The booster vaccination rate is 81%. And then if you're looking at the full vaccination rate for 60 to 69 is 88%, 70 to 79 is 82%, and over the age of 80 is 69%. Now here is where the issue that we need to address. Now, this is what I was talking with. Again, a few weeks ago, I was talking with an anti-China YouTuber on Twitter. He was challenging me because he said, Cyrus, don't you think China, being a one-party state, could easily implement a mandatory vaccine? Of course they can. They're a one-party state. The reality is that China doesn't want to do that because it's about control. Again, I predicted to him, I said, no, you're wrong. Here's what China's going to do. They're going to pivot away from zero COVID because number one, China's government said in the 20th Party Congress, the key thing that they need to work on right now is the economy. As we know, over the last 40 years in China, the reason why China has grown into this position of global dominance, become the second largest economy, become the key player in our global infrastructure is because they have prioritized the economy. Prioritizing the economy, it lifts hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. It creates jobs. Growing that economy has been vital to China's government success because that's what people relate a good government to. At the end of the day, this is exactly my number one point when I talk about government. What I want governments to do, and that's regardless of where they are in the world. Okay, this is in the United States, in Canada, China, wherever it is, you have to be prioritizing the economy because the economy is what drives people's daily lives. Okay, when you are creating jobs, you are building industries, you are helping people move up, from the poor to the middle class. This is where people's lives are being affected. Okay. And this is where I want people to really focus on this. So when I look at American politicians here, I don't want you to lecture me on, all of these human rights and these things like that, because, for example, in the United States right now, we waste so much time on a woke culture here in the United States. We have so much time talking about, let's protest this, let's march for this, let's do this, let's do this. At the end of the day, all that's just nonsense. That's just noise. What are you doing to drive the economy? Because at the end of the day, if I'm be able to put food on my table and I'm able to live a better life and I'm able to provide my children with a better life in the future, that's the game changer. That's how you influence and build a better generation for the future. So that's what I said to this anti-China YouTuber. I said, look, China has to prioritize the economy, and it will. It's not going to implement zero COVID for the next 5 years to crush the Chinese economy. People have this idea, oh, Xi Jinping is trying to destroy capitalism. Xi Jinping is trying to destroy all of the tech giants. No, absolutely not. WeChat, Alibaba, these have been key instruments used by the Chinese government and used by Chinese people to help lift millions of people out of poverty. So that theory is completely false. In addition to that, I think it actually is very interesting because let me go back to earlier this year. Earlier this year, Beijing government announced that it was instituting a mandatory vaccine for elderly people in the city of Beijing. Now, the interesting thing with Chinese people, one thing that we need to understand is that many Chinese people they're very fearful of COVID-19, but they're also very fearful of the vaccine. And this is something that's a reality. And this is especially as you get older, okay? And this is something I said, China needs to do a better job of communicating with the people, instituting a vaccine awareness program. I'm very pro-vaccine for people above the age of, 65. I'm not pro-vaccine for, especially children. For example, my children are not vaccinated against COVID-19. I will 100% not vaccinate them against this disease. I think it poses zero risk to my children at all. Now, for example, my mother's 78 years old. She's not in the best health. She's in good health, but she has some health issues. I'm 100% for her getting that vaccine. I think if you look at my daughter, who's a perfectly healthy individual at age 7, compared to my mother, who's 78, there's the difference there. So I think what China, and I said, China's government has to come out and they have to basically, institute a better vaccine awareness program for those over the age of 80. And earlier this year, when they instituted a mandatory vaccine, Chinese citizens in Beijing, they spoke out. They went to social media. They protested. They said, no, we do not want this. And immediately Xi Jinping reversed that. And I thought that was actually an interesting case study because, once again, it proves something that we often hear in the West. Chinese people have no freedom. Chinese people, the government never listens to the people. Well, actually, the reality is that there was a lot more freedom than, for example, in Canada. In Canada, our government, we instituted a mandatory vaccine. You could not go to a restaurant. You could not board a bus, a train, a plane. You could not go anywhere in Vancouver, Canada, unless you were double vaccinated. And they restricted that freedom. You did not have the freedom to choose your vaccination status. Interesting enough, China did give that freedom earlier in the year. Now, I think what again, my criticism is what we should be instituting is we need to be, saying, look, if you are above the age of 70, if you are in the elderly, look, it's probably in your best interest to get the vaccine. Let's give you some more vaccine awareness. And that's exactly what China's done. They've said, look, we really need to target this population above the age of 80. That's the 1 weak link. That's where about 30% of the population above the age of 80 is unvaccinated. That's where this majority is. But again, we go back to the Deutsche Welle headline here. And when you say, wow, with much of the population unvaccinated, that's where people are misleading. This is how people get the false idea of China, because again, we can easily refute that. And this is something that I want another say. This is something that I brought up. You can see that new COVID model predicts over 1 million deaths in China through 2023. I don't think that this is going to happen. And so this is where I really wanted another main point. I wanted to debunk basically these two myths that I've heard. Number one, the first myth that we debunked was much of China is unvaccinated. Okay, well, we know that to be false. And the other thing that I want people to understand is I really want to clear this up. Many people think that America and the West is so superior because we have mRNA vaccines. Let's be honest. In the clinical trials and the data that we know from the Sinovac vaccines are just as effective as mRNA vaccines. And if you really want to know what Chinese people think about it, all right, here is the West with their mRNA vaccines. Life expectancy in the US has fallen to the lowest level seen in 26 years. Now, that dot that you see, you can see that there's a big decline over the past 2.5 years. Well, that's basically when COVID happened. So again, if we have the superior technology in the West, if America's mRNA vaccines are so superior to China, I don't think you would see this drop in data here. So for me, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. I have many friends that obviously, if you live in China, and you're vaccinated, you've only been vaccinated with Sinovac. And I think that's where, I would have no problem. Obviously, I am double vaccinated. I did get 2 doses of Moderna. I was vaccinated in Canada. That's what was available to me. But for example, I've got a good friend of mine, Alex, who lives in Chongqing. Alex from Reporterfy Media. I know that I believe he was in Thailand and got vaccinated with Sinovac, in order to go to China. And now he lives in Chongqing. So he went through that. I'm going to bring Alex into the stream in a little bit because I want to give Alex the opportunity to come on and give us a little bit of insight on like what's happening on the ground in Chongqing, one of China's largest cities. I think over 30 million population over there in the greater Chongqing area. But again, these are some really big data that we need to analyze here. And guys, I want to take a break. Sometimes I go on these tangents and I just run with it. As you can just see, I'm very passionate about this. I absolutely love what I do here on YouTube. I'm just so blessed to have a voice here. I'm blessed to have an audience. I'm blessed to have the support from all of you who come in. We're coming up to 1,000 people on the live stream here, which is amazing. And this is true. Let's go ahead and go here. This is a really good one. JJ Lama, U.S. so woke, their only concern is people's pronouns. Yeah, this is a big problem. Again, like for me, I'm going to give criticism to the U.S. government. Wasting time on gender pronouns, it's a complete waste of time. I mean, again, this is my problem with the left, is that they spend so much time on this woke nonsense that really does nothing for society. Like I'll give you an example. Nancy Pelosi, she's saying that, in Congress, I think that, what's important is we should not address, if you're a female and you're a mother, we should not address you as a mother. We can't use the word mother because that might be offensive to people that are not allowed to have children. So let's put forward a bill that we can't use the word mother in Congress. Again, if Chinese government officials heard this, they would just be like, why are you talking about this? We're dealing with bigger things here. We're talking about economy. We're talking about COVID-19. We're talking about what's our 5-year plan? What do we want to do in 5, 10, 15 years? I mean, people would absolutely laugh at this if this is what we knew we're talking about in the West. I mean, it's just nonsense, absolute nonsense. All right, guys, let's go back here and let's see here. I'm just going through the comment section here, looking if there's seen any. All right. Well, let's go ahead. So I think we've proved a lot of things here. We've talked about the myths. We've talked about the unvaccinated. So again, let me give you my prediction here. So I think we basically hit on all the points that we needed to, but I do want to bring in this point here. New COVID model predicts over 1 million deaths in China through 2023. In my opinion, I don't think we're going to see that, and here's the simple reason why. China has opened up at a time when it needed to. I mean, again, you can make the argument that they waited a little bit too long, but this is the Band-Aid that they essentially needed to rip off, and they ripped it off in the fastest way possible. They have, the COVID-19 is surging throughout China. Again, I have a tremendous amount of contacts all over the country. Everybody I know has been infected with it. And for the majority of people, the vast majority of people, again, they're vaccinated. And for the vast majority of people, it's been very mild. It has been very mild, and most of them are making that recovery. I do not think that you're going to see millions of people dying from COVID-19. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a difficult time for China over the next couple of months. It is difficult. As we know, we're less than a month away from Chinese New Year. Chinese New Year is on January 22nd next year. This is a time where people are traveling. People are going to be, COVID's going to continue to travel. We're going to probably see, but the good thing here is that with, over half the population now being exposed to COVID, that's basically going to peak very soon. Within the next few weeks, it's going to probably peak around Chinese New Year, and then it's going to go down. I think by March and April, you're going to see a very different China. And I think what's most exciting is that you're going to see China really opening up to international travel again. And this is something that I want, because what's amazing is that I started this channel in Canada. Actually, I didn't record any of the videos here while I was in China. what I want to do is I really want to take this channel. I want to go back to China. My goal is to get back to China in 2023, because I know that if we can get back on the ground in China, we're going to take this channel to a whole new level, because we're going to be recording those vlogs in Chinese on the streets in China, showing you guys the real China. That is a real goal of mine, to get back to do that. And I also do a lot of consulting work. I'm helping with a couple of companies that I work with in China. They are focusing on recruiting foreign talent to come back to China. Just this past week, they have started to post on job boards trying to get foreigners to come back into China. They've been given the green light from the Chinese government in order to be able to process those work visas. Very difficult to get the work visa beforehand, but now they have that green light in order to do that. And again, going back to the greater picture here, when we talk about U.S.-China relations, this is exactly what needs to happen, because China being shut down to the West, China being closed off to foreign visitors, it's difficult for people to have a rational view of China, because it's largely closed off, right? We can't go to China. We can't hop on a plane and go to China and show you what it's really like. And so I think this is a really good thing, because what we're going to see is we're going to see China opening up in 2023. And again, I think it's very optimistic. I'm very optimistic for China. I think this was the right decision. I think China, in the end, they're going to win big from this, because they're certainly going to have some deaths. They're certainly going to have some difficult times. This is going to be short-term pain for long-term gain, what I predict in the future for 2023. But that's basically all I had to say for today's live stream. And Alex, thank you for waiting. I'm going to bring Alex into the stream here. He's been very patient here. Alex, how's things?
Hi. Thank you for having me on the program. Let's do a bit of a sound check. Am I okay? You guys hear me all right? That would be great.
I can hear you good, Alex. So
fantastic.
Yeah, I want to know what, like, you're on the ground in Chongqing. So tell me, like, what has it been? Because I remember when you messaged me like 3 weeks ago. You're like, man, like a light switch. Overnight, testing booths gone, QR code gone. Give us what's the last 3-4 weeks been like for you?
Well, currently, I just arrived back from Chengdu a few hours ago by train. Now, that was a completely different experience from 18 months ago, even from 8 months ago, or even 8 weeks ago. All the testing booths, all the pandemic COVID measures have been pretty much eliminated. And it's quite a surreal feeling when you go to these train stations. These are big train stations that accommodate a lot of people. Just to give you an example, the Twin Cities here, Chengdu, Chongqing, there's 110 bullet trains that are going back and forth daily. Now, if you go back a few months ago, you would find that the attempt to get to the train station was, a bit difficult, because then you'd be in a line to get a COVID test or follow extra measures. Now, we were quite accustomed and quite used to that. Being tested, having a COVID test almost daily was a normal thing here. And traveling, you would see, okay, extra lineups, and you'd be prepared for it. But now, as of last week, when my wife and I traveled to Chengdu, you're waiting for these either extra COVID measures to be there, and they weren't. So you're looking at certain doors, whether it's shopping malls or restaurants or metro lines, thinking that, are they open? Is the mall open? Shouldn't there be a big booth with a big QR code that you can scan? And all those things were taken away. So now it's added more time onto everyone's day. People aren't queuing up, waiting to get their mobile phones ready to show that green code. What big data was very effective. It was working. But now all those have disappeared. So that traditional travel, and I just said to my wife a few hours ago, can you feel it? I can definitely feel it. Yeah. And you can feel now, this was the first time where we had traveled in China for me, I mean, without any COVID or pandemic measures in place. Now, people are still wearing masks. Mm-hmm. They are still understanding the, social distancing. Yeah, I do hear more people coughing. It is quite common. But I did want to bring up a couple of things that, I was backstage watching your program. There is some data that I think is important here, because everyone's always trying to get the Chinese version of the numbers. Everyone says,
Right.
"Oh, are they the real numbers? Are they the fake numbers? Or how can we trust the numbers?" Well, here's an interesting institute in Washington State, in Seattle. It's called the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation.
Okay.
They're an institute for health metrics and evaluation, is a research institute working in the area of global health statistics and impact evaluations at the University of Washington. Now, this is for the people that don't want to trust the Chinese data. They are even reporting, and this is their estimate, through the peak of all of this, they're coming up with their based and their current projection. And I'm just going to give a death figure out here. They're predicting 293,127. Now, that is a Western prediction
Nice.
on the amount of deaths. Another note that I wanted to tell the viewers today is on an average day, 27,000 people. This is a UN report has quoted this number. 27,000 Chinese do die on a daily basis here. Pre-COVID, these are UN numbers that are being quoted here. That is the United Nations World Population Perspective Report from 2019. This is pre-COVID. 27,765 Chinese die per day, approximately 9.8 million a year. And wonderfully, 49,000 beautiful Chinese babies are born daily. So the news that I think that people can pay attention to here is definitely that report that I will try to share a link with you later. But if people do want to easily Google it, it's Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. They are also pointing out another interesting figure that I'm just going to rattle these off while we're on the program here, Cyrus, is that they are really going into detail about the infected rate here. Now, we are seeing this spread quite fast. We predicted that we might have seen the peak around April. Now we're hearing it's around February. And that number is really starting to climb. And they're saying the infection fatality rate is 0.000207. I have to say that being here for 18 months, coming from a country, Thailand, who had a intense lockdown, a very, very intense lockdown, lasting almost 100 days, almost mirroring the United Kingdom, who had 110 days, Australia, 117 days of lockdown. For most part, this country has been open domestically ever since. But I can tell you that living here and understanding that how they use big data, contact tracing apps, the COVID prevention measures, if this would have been the Wuhan strain that was ripping through here now, we would be having a completely different conversation. Being in a city of 32 million, I can tell you that things are pretty standard here right now. Are there people going to fever clinics? Yep. Shortage of medicine. We did see probably in the first day or 2 days, even before some of the cases started to rise here, people were naturally stocking up. But now most people in the city here, they post on their Weibo accounts that they've left a bag of ibuprofen tied up to a bridge if you need it. It's at this location.
Nice.
There's
cool.
a lot of community sharing from it. A lot of my friends, you can see they got anybody have a fever, come grab this from me, come grab that from me. We're seeing a lot of rapid antigen tests being delivered to businesses in town. So for most part, it's pretty much what we expected here. I do want to add another note to this, Cyrus, since you have me on the show here. We did get
Alex, let me just, I want to bring up one thing that I think you brought really important, because you said, for example, you know, we've often hear in the West that China, you know, it's like 3 years of zero COVID. And the interesting thing is I love the data that you said, like the UK was over 100 days lockdown, Australia over 100-day lockdown. You know, we've seen these strict lockdown. Now, the interesting thing with China is that the zero COVID policy was actually, it was not a nationwide lockdown, right? People think like the entire country of China was locked down for 3 years. It really was that, you know, you had periodic lockdowns, and I know people in China that are living in certain parts where for the last 3 years they have not had any lockdown, right? Because
Mhm.
it's just, you know, they live in a very dense, a very sparsely populated, you know, part of the country. They, for example, they're just in a rural village, you know, they're just, you know, and so it's like, hey, our lives really haven't been, nothing's really changed other than the fact that we're not really
Mhm.
traveling much, but it's not like we are, you know, been in our houses for 3 years. And I think that's important to understand is that, you know, there's been cases, right? Like we did see Shanghai that went through 100+ day lockdown specifically for Shanghai.
Mm.
But, you know, I know people that were in Suzhou, you know, just 30 minutes away that were not locked down and that were traveling about. So it's really important to get that distinction. And I think that brought it up because, I mean, for example, Australia had an incredible lockdown, you know, that was really long and very, very strict. So,
Yeah.
you know, very, very different. So it's just important for people to understand, you know, that point as well. But go ahead.
Yeah,
I was just wondering.
I think that's very important. You know, you bring up Australia. I really feel for the Australians that we're not even allowed back into their own country as being passport holders of their own nation, not
And
being allowed to come back to your own motherland is quite disturbing what we've seen. But I mean, when we're talking about cities in China here, you are correct that some cities completely went unscathed. But when you're dealing with huge cities like Chongqing, what it will start with is it will start with a district, maybe a district or a county within that province or region, and they will use big data. And you know, for most of the year where I was been here, about 18 months, I would say we'd have maybe a 2-3 day mini. I don't even want to use the word lockdown because measures were still in place that you could go out and do most of your daily lives. But if cases started to build, the community leaders, and it's quite amazing here how things work here. Put it this way: if there's a pothole or a hole in front of your street, you call the municipality, and probably within about 48 hours, it's fixed. So there's a lot of responsibility, and it comes right, you know, from the top, then to the mayor, then to the districts. And some of these districts do not want to have an outbreak, and
yeah, of course. Yeah,
they,
absolutely.
they sometimes they will go overboard on it, and they will, you know, do it a lot faster. But here's a piece of news that I think is important here. This just came across the wire here a few hours ago that China is to reopen its borders, drop its COVID quarantine from the 8th of
I
January
saw that. Yeah.
within 2 weeks. We are hearing that. I just want to say that speculation. That was also mentioned in the SCMP and other various other media outlets, but that is, you know, I would say there is some truth to that. How they're going to open it is another story. And I think the audience needs to understand here that this is a country of 1.5 billion. You can't just hit the go button and the airlines will come back. This is going to take, you know, quite a mammoth task. I would still imagine there will be some measures in place, but that is incredibly good news. But, you know, Cyrus, things are changing by the, you know, by the hour here. We're
Oh,
seeing things
definitely.
change by the hour.
Oh, definitely. Well, another thing I want to bring up, Alex, that I think is really interesting is, is another point that we can kind of disprove about how the West is analyzing China. One of the things that people have said in the West is that essentially China's government has kind of painted themselves into a corner, and that they don't have that ability to pivot. And I
Hmm.
think it's so amazing because what we see is a difference. I mean, I'm going to contrast this with the United States. I think it's very difficult for the United States to pivot because of the way our government is structured. Right, we have a two-party state, and you can see a great example would simply be, you know, when Joe Biden, obviously a Democrat, comes out and says we're going to institute this policy about vaccines. You know, you go to the state of Florida, where you have a very Republican, very strong red wave there in the state of Florida, where your governor Ron DeSantis will say, well, no, we're not going to listen to the president at all. We're going to do our thing. And so that's where it's difficult for the United States to kind of all get on the same page and to basically make that pivot. And I'm not going to say that's entirely bad, because I think, for example, even I was in California last week, and for example, I took my kids to a museum and they said, oh, you need to have mandatory masks, for everybody over the age of 2. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm really surprised. Like, I haven't been anywhere in, like, in Florida, like there's no mask requirements anywhere. But in California, much more Democrat, you're going to have those mask requirements. So you can kind of see how the United States is a very polarized society. It's very divided. It's also how our government works. That's why, both the left and the right, they don't want to work with each other. They basically want to just block each other. And it's very difficult to make that forward progress. Where, as you said, like you said, in China, you do have a one-party state. It's extremely easy for them to pivot because they can literally flip a switch. Hey, it's zero COVID today. Hey, you know what? We're going to change this policy. But it does go from the top down. And like you said, if you're a district manager, or if you are, a government official that is in charge of, hey, I oversee this local district, your powers come from a top, right? It comes from the top down. You don't want to lose face, or you don't want to underperform. You do definitely want to make sure that you are listening and adhering to the guidelines that are given to you from above, I should say. And we saw that in Shanghai, right? We saw when the Shanghai outbreak happened, that's exactly what happened, right? The local government in Shanghai said, we're going to do things a little differently. All of a sudden, Beijing central government said, nope, we're going to overstep you. We're coming into Shanghai. We're going to lock this down. We're going to do it our way. And so you see that difference in how, the society is. And that's basically a government difference. But I think it's remarkable because that's something that many people don't understand, is that China's government does have that ability to pivot because it's a one-party state. I mean, that's exactly what it can do. And when China says, hey, we are going to open up January 8th, we're going to drop that. I think what we're seeing here, Alex, I'm very bullish, for China in 2023, because I know that they have to, get that economy back on track. I know that, I was reading a report from McKinsey about foreign direct investment. Increased tremendously in 2021, and they have the data for the first 6 months of 2022, up 24% from last year. There's a tremendous amount of, as much of the anti-China sentiment we see in the West. I always like to say this, I always like to analyze what politicians say, because we know they say things based on emotion. And then I actually look at what businessmen are doing. And, the businesses are doing the opposite, right? They're investing more in China. They are, for example, I'm in Las Vegas right now, and we've got the Consumer Electronics Show coming. And we've got a ton of Chinese companies here that are coming to Las Vegas for the largest electronics show in the world. I'm actually going to be going to that. It's going to be the first week of the new year. I'm going to be doing a lot of videos and kind of highlighting all these Chinese companies that are coming here, because every one of them wants to do business with the U.S. And we have more trade going on between the U.S. and China in 2022 than any year in history. So as much as this kind of anti-China stuff's going on, I'm optimistic, buddy. I'm optimistic that I can hopefully be in Chongqing with you sometime in 2023.
Oh, no, that would be great. I think, if we look back at some of the media reports that were reported after the 20th Congress, there was also a 20-point plan about reopening the country. I keep calling it a company, but it was very detailed. So this is no surprise we're pivoting to this part in these COVID measures. Now, yes, there are people that are catching COVID. Yes, it's now. You go back 3 months ago, 4 months ago, if somebody got COVID, they would make the news.
Yeah,
but
right,
now
exactly.
it's now. First, we're going in a phase here where people were generally extremely scared about this, and understanding the strains. They know all the strains. They know the deltas, and they know the omicrons. They know it. If it's a BA5, it's BF7. They are studying this, endlessly.
Yeah.
Now, also, with the health professionals, you got to remember that it's quite an acceptable understanding on how the health clinics work. Fever clinics, and I heard you were talking about before that most people in the United States have that option to visit a clinic or visit a doctor's office. But here in China, a lot of things are done in the hospital. With the hospitals, I was, viewing and actually visiting them because I've been doing a report for our company, that these preparations were going on weeks ago. preparing for something like this to happen. It's not like they just woke up one morning and said, okay, let's roll the dice with 1.5 billion people and see what happens. Even though even though a lot of the Western media do want this country, sorry to say this, but a lot of the mainstream and Western media do want this country to fail. They do, as morbid and sick as it is. There are a lot of news channels that are reporting and being very ridiculous in some of their numbers. No one holds them accountable, unfortunately. We might next year. Alex, yes, go ahead.
I know. Let me just bring in these. Sorry to cover your face off a little bit. I mean, again, it's just Gordon Chang is the poster boy for this. I mean, he makes a living off of hating China. I mean, it's sad because he's publicly said, I mean, he's ashamed of being ethnically Chinese, and as a result, he just hates on China more and more every day. It's a sad thing. I mean, he's half Chinese, exactly like my children, and I get it. The guy was bullied as a child, and you know that's certainly unexcusable. But there's nothing wrong with being Chinese. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being proud of China. This guy, but this is the thing. I mean, this is someone that wants China to fail tremendously. He's been calling for it for 20 plus years. I mean, but here's the thing. I mean, like you can never win with Gordon, because I mean, here he contradicts himself saying, look, you know, the regime, I just love that word. I mean, anytime you say the regime, you know, you're trying, you know, it's automatically a very negative connotation, but it's like, look, I predict that they're going to do this for another 5 years, because again, this is what Gordon, and again, the anti-China YouTuber that I was, you know, commenting on Twitter, you know, they basically, it's all about control. It has nothing to do with health. And then here, all of a sudden, as soon as they change, it's like, well, pray for China. You know, now they're defenseless, so irresponsible from China's government. So it's constantly this damn if you do, damn if you don't. China can never win. But the interesting thing is it's amazing because, you know, China's government is so systematic in what it and how it you know, people tend to think that they just make these decisions just out of thin air. Right? I mean, it's just like, oh, they woke up one morning and they just like, you know, screw it, let's just open up the country. I mean, you know that China has been analyzing a tremendous amount of data. And again, I think the criticism that you can give China is that they waited a little too long. I mean, in my opinion, I think they could have opened up earlier. Now, that's my opinion. But again, they have made this pivot, and it's something where, and I've had some people ask me, say, Cyrus, don't you think it's a little bit weird, though, that China's government has said, look, for the last 3 years, this is a deadly disease, and now it's like, okay, we're going to go ahead and open up and let it rip. And I think what you see is again, it's you have to, your opinion of COVID needs to change with the data, right? We know the strand today is very much less significant than what it was before. And you mentioned that before, right? Like if it was, if this was the strand of, I mean, if China, of the Wuhan strand back in March 2020, it'd be a massive problem. I mean, huge problem for China. So again, I think that's where, we go back and we have to be just honest, let's be honest and say, look, there was definitely some success and great achievements done even in 2022. Like I mentioned, the Beijing 2022 Olympics. I mean, fantastic event for China, fantastic event for the world. That was only made possible because of China's, zero COVID policy that kept the athletes safe. And then again, now we're at a point where, China's going to pivot. They've done the research. They've done the data. It's exciting because I think it's going to be healthy for China in the long term. One of the things that I was very, as someone that advocates for a good U.S.-China relationship, I was worried for China because whenever China is cut off from the world, we look back at Chinese history, that's when it's typically the weakest, right? When China didn't have these international relationships, when it's essentially China all by itself. China's not stupid. They know that they need the world. They depend on these good relationships. I mean, China's the manufacturer of the world. It's the number one trading partner for the vast majority of the world. It's how China grows its economy, how its business, and I think it's a good thing for China. I mean, I think if we fast forward this, by the summertime, I'm optimistic that we're going to have daily flights back to China. People can be traveling for tourism. Hopefully, I'm on the streets in China, making some really good content, continuing to help build this channel and really helping promote, China to the world.
I just want to add to people like Gordon Chang and stuff like that. I can understand that when one of the greatest things in the world to ever happen to your life has you've kicked it, you've beaten it, you've abused it. Even though you're so in love with it, I'm talking about Gordon's probably love at one point for China where he decided to turn another direction and scream and kick and just absolutely do everything he can. There is not a person on this earth that has ever been to China that I can imagine would have that much disdain for a country like this. This country is absolutely amazing. It has given people, even Westerners that come here, the ability to expand their companies to, to an amazing level. Look at Tesla's investment here. Look at Apple's investment here. These are major, major companies. A lot of the Fortune 500 companies have a presence here. So when you see someone like him kicking and screaming, well, I can understand when probably some of the greatest parts of his life he will never, ever be able to experience again because of such shame he's brought upon himself, especially when it comes to humiliating himself when it comes to China. And you can only see that with people that have pretty narrow vision. It's unfortunate. I know he probably wakes up in the morning and sees China in the headlines and he just goes, oh, what a great country. But he can't say that. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. It's tough. Alex, I'm gonna end. So feel free to stay on for this segment. I'm just gonna end because I told the guys, I told the streamers, I said I had a really interesting comment. I want to close out this because I think it
sounds good.
Highlights on what Alex and I said. But this is interesting because many of you know I've relocated back to the United States after 15 years abroad. This is a comment that came in last night on my YouTube channel. Cyrus, since you came back home, have you encountered any bad experiences, like people giving you a dirty look, or a name, calling you a traitor, CPC shill? How have your relative and friends say things about you? This is a really good comment, and I want people to understand this. One of the reasons that I came back to the United States is because I'm someone that advocates a good relationship between the United States and China. And I came back to the United States for an important job because I was living in Canada. But, one is I wanted to come back to be closer to my family. But two, if I'm working on U.S.-China relations, I think I should be living in one of those two countries. And my reach here in America is better because what I do every single day is I connect with Americans. And I can honestly answer this question. I have met with so many Americans in the last 6 months of relocating here. And I talk to everybody about China. I'm very open. I say, you can go to my YouTube channel. I'm very proud of the work that I do. Go to Cyrus Jansen. Just type in Cyrus China. You can find all my videos on China. And what I have found is I have not found a single person that I have connected with that has had any issues with the content that I do. Because what I can do is I can sit down and I can rationally talk to anybody about China. And one of my friends here in America, he's a police officer, and he works in he's basically a private detective. And he said, I'm really fascinated by your channel because in the West, like all we hear is negative, right? It's all I hear is negative about China. But as a detective, my job is to examine all sides of the story. So I'm fascinated by this because, for example, I've never heard of the BRICS. I never once heard of BRICS in my entire life. Obviously Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. I've never heard of that alliance once in my entire life. And all of a sudden, you're talking about China's inventing a digital currency. China is now, contemplating selling or buying oil in renminbi in Saudi Arabia. This is a huge deal, Cyrus. We are completely blocked from this in America's society. We hear nothing about this. And I said, yeah, I'm trying to bring a little bit more objectivity here. And I said, look, I will talk about the negative. I will talk about the positive. I'm not trying to say China's government's perfect or China's this utopia society, but it's and I just said, look at like you just said, Alex, look at all the Dow companies that are coming here that are investing. A couple of days ago, Christmas Eve, I played golf with a couple of guys here in Las Vegas. And it was amazing. One of the guys, he owns an LED company. So his company makes all of the signs that you see on the Las Vegas Strip. All of these 3D signs, LED screens. I played with him, and I played with another guy who owns a Hollywood. It's basically a studio here in Las Vegas. And it's incredible because both of them, they said, our entire business is based on China. I mean, like we could not function without China. All of the LED screens that are seen on the Las Vegas Strip, I've been doing this for 25 years. All of them come from China. Amazing quality, amazing price points. I've had so many people come over the last 25 years, come from China, come here, come to America. How do we do more business? How do we do this? I mean, my relationship with China is incredible. You know, the other guy that has these, you know, he's built this amazing studio where he films all of these commercials, you know, from the NFL to Audi to all of this. He's like, look, all of our tech is from China. Like we just simply don't have the manufacturing capability inside this country. We are just we so need a relationship with China. So this is where I want people to understand, you know, when you talk to successful people inside the United States of America, you talk to people that really understand how it works. I mean, Alex, you're an experienced stock market trader. I mean, you have lived around the world. You get it, right? You're successful. You understand how this world economy works. You've been an expat for many years. When you talk to people that understand the global economy, everybody understands China's role, right? The people that hate China the most are people that are very ignorant, and this is unfortunately what people like Fox News. This is their target market: people that have not traveled, people that are largely ignorant, and that people that we can basically manipulate. And this is where the media is in this country, is that they can manipulate, and they say, I mean, the stuff that they spew. I mean, and this is the problem. You get a guy like Gordon Chang who goes on and spews all of this nonsense, and this is why people have a negative impression. But this is also where there's great opportunity, because Alex, you know, we're going to start something new in the new year. Why don't you tell everybody about it? But we're going to start, you know, this is why, you know, our YouTube channels continue to grow, and why we have a dedicated fan base of fans all over the world. I mean, guys, we've been well over 1,000 people in the stream, people tuning in from all corners of the globe. I really appreciate you spending your time, because time is our most valuable asset. And when you give me the time, it's a big responsibility. So I want to make sure I deliver that quality content. Alex understands that, every week delivering quality content. Alex, tell everybody, what are we doing in the new year?
So it looks like about January 15th, we'll be relaunching the Let's Talk China show here to the audience. And we have a lot in store. Of course, Cyrus and myself will be mainstays on that program, as well as we'll be bringing in Daniel Dumbrell, it looks like, for the first weekend, and also another appearance from another major channel on YouTube. Now, we have had many discussions about this program probably over the last 6 months, Cyrus and I, and we have agreed that it's going to be pretty high caliber. The guests, sorry, my microphone just about fell there. The guests that we're going to be bringing on this program are going to, you know, really change the landscape on what Let's Talk China was before and what it's going to be in the future. We're going to really, I think, bring it up to a level where it never has been. We are going to be launching it in the new studio here in Chongqing. We've been working on that studio for about 4 months now. You're going to see a much more professional show. It's not going to be like it was before. And I think, Cyrus, I'm going to pass it to you to maybe describe where we're going with the modeling of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want, guys, first of all, I want to give Alex a big thank you and a shout out, because I'm gonna rewind the clocks back to around June 2020. I had a YouTube channel of about 2,000-3,000 people. I was just starting my YouTube journey, and Alex, you know, had reached out to me and said, "Hey, man, would you like to join, you know, the YouTube, you know, our program called Let's Talk China?" And, you know, at the time we had, you know, the Barretts, Guilo, Matt from Jayo Nation, Alex, myself. You know, there was always about 5 of us that would go on this show. We had a couple months there, and I remember, like, my first appearance, you know, I gained probably about 1,000 subscribers in the next coming days. So I mean, like, you know, I went from 3,000 to 4,000 subscribers. It was a big deal, you know, for me at the time, you know, and it was because of appearance on this show. So Alex, thanks for, you know, always believing in me and supporting me from day one. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
And I think what it was is, you know, it's kind of like, let's talk China. You know, that was the concept of it. And it was at the time, it was a bit more casual. And I mean, we liked those shows because it was 5 guys, you know, kind of sharing ideas, kind of sharing like what's going on. And I think what we want to do now is we want to take it to the next level, where you're going to see what's important and what's needed is we want to have a consistent product, you know, something where it's like, okay, every week at, you know, let's just say Fridays at 5 p.m. You know, we don't know the exact time yet. Let's just say that for an example. Fridays at 5 p.m. every week, we're going to have a new show, and it's going to be something consistent that you can mark on your calendar. You know, it's going to be a quality show. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring in, you know, Alex and I, all of us, we're going to try to bring in very high quality guests. So we want to bring in, and just we really want to, again, it's just providing good content for you guys to enjoy. And I think Alex, I mean, him and I both, we all know we have a big responsibility here because, there needs to be more objective reporting about China. There needs to be, more people that are speaking out for a positive relationship. Again, I don't like the label that I'm pro-China. I think I'm very much pro-engagement. I'm no more pro-China than I am pro-America. I mean, I love both countries. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that I love China. There's nothing wrong with saying that I want a good relationship with the U.S. and China. That's my stance. I want the U.S. to succeed. Obviously, it's my home country. It's the country I live in with my family. I want China to succeed as well. I mean, it's like Alex had said, there's people that want China to fail desperately. People don't really understand that. If China fails, if China is a catastrophe, that means our economy in America is going to get hammered too. It is a two-way street. So again, we're going to be bringing in high-profile guests that are going to be really adding a lot to this. I'm talking, authors of China books, people that have, academia, professors, people that have had really good experience and that could really, very credible people, that you want to hear from, that you really want to hear these insights from. So we got a lot of guests in the pipeline. And again, you're going to be seeing Alex. He has worked with, really producing from the production side. I can say that we've been working on this for well over 6 months now, really preparing for this. But it's at a point now where we're very excited that we're going to launch it. So look for this January 14th, 15th, depending on your time zone. We'll be announcing this in the next couple of weeks. But I wanted to bring Alex in to tell us more about the stream. Tell us more about the situation in Chongqing as someone living on the ground. And number two, we're going to kind of end today's stream with this big announcement that we're going to take 2023, guys. We're going to take it to the next level. So look forward to that.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Cyrus. I think also that what I want to add about that show is that we're going to be, I would say stating facts and less of what other shows are out there that really get personal. This one is going to be pretty much based on, bringing, like you said before, the guests here, professors, and even a couple of, hear me out on this one, a few politicians have actually reached out to me that would like to come on the program as well to, either enter into a debate or as well to also speak about maybe their concerns as well. And I think it's important that we are open-minded to engaging with these types of conversations. And I mean, you're well versed in handling those types of situations as well. So it's going to be quite fun, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it will be. It's going to be great. Guys, I want to say thank you all for spending time with us. I hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas. Thank you for joining me. Today's my birthday, same as Chairman Mao. So, fun little tidbit there. But thank you for joining me on my birthday. It's fun to spend time with, couple thousand people that have joined the program here today. And again, we're going to have a lot of exciting things happening in 2023. I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be our best year on YouTube yet in 2023. I want to say thank you to everybody for supporting, this channel. This channel has grown the best it's grown. 2022 is the best year I've had on YouTube. We've really taken it to the next level, and I'm really excited. I was doing some statistics on this. So in 2020, my channel had 4 million views. In 2021, it had 8 million views. So it doubled. And then last year in 2022, or through this year, we've gotten 16 million views. So we've had, 2 consecutive years of doubling, on the views here and subscriber growth. So, we're continuing to get the message out. We've had, 7 of the top 10 most viewed videos on this channel have been produced in 2022. So there's some really nice statistics that I want to say thank you guys. Thank you for supporting this channel. Thanks for supporting Alex. I know many of you want to hear from Daniel Dumrill as well. I'm excited to have him on the show, and we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to bring a lot of objectivity and truth and analysis. And again, I think it's just fighting for what we need to see in this world, and that is just engagement. Again, I think engagement is the key thing that we need here. Everybody, I'm going to sign off there. And Alex, thank you so much for
You're welcome
from joining me tonight from live in Chongqing.
Cheers.
We'll see you in a couple of weeks, my friend.
Yeah, sounds good. Happy
All right.
birthday. Take care.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. I'm going to end it with this. I'm going to end it with our classic little show ending here. Alex, thanks for these awesome drone shots. Everyone,
Pleasure.
we'll see you in a new video soon.